Welcome back to Free Media. I'm Amber Duke.
And I'm Robby Soave. Well, Tucker Carlson interviewed Nick Fuentes, drawing criticism from many conservatives who pointed out that Fuentes' history of making racist and anti-Semitic statements. Carlson did push back against some of Fuentes' claims, though this moment, which we're about to watch, went unaddressed. Let's take a look.
So it was like late December. It's actually funny. It was December 18th. I remember because that's an important date to me. And it's Joseph Stalin's birthday.
Oh.
I'm a fan.
You're a fan of Stalin's?
Mm-hmm. Always an admirer. But we don't need to go into that, I guess.
Well, that's, okay, let's get back to it. We'll circle back to that.
It was weird because the reason I mentioned that, it was almost like, because I woke up that day and I was like, oh, it's December 18th. And I was just like very acutely aware of like, today's like a strange day. This is the day that the attempt happened.
So that part got flagged, I think, because obviously Fuentes makes all sorts of offensive or bad statements, but I don't think anyone would ever hear him say that Stalin was good before. And then unfortunately they didn't come back to it because I would have been interested to see him describe why he thinks Stalin is good. So I did get through the entire 2 hours of this sucker this morning. Lots I could say, lots you probably have to say too. So I don't, some conservatives are frustrated that Tucker even did this interview. I think deplatforming doesn't work. If you could deplatform Nick Fuentes, he would be history by now. In the modern media environment, it is simply impossible for a small number, or for the organizations or what the conservative media to say, this person's beyond the pale, we won't engage with their ideas, and have them actually be silenced. It doesn't work because social media makes that impossible. They did that effectively to Fuentes, and he has created his own or thrived in an alternate media ecosystem by saying things that, for better or worse, I think mostly for worse, but there are some areas where I agree with him, I guess, for better or worse, he is flourishing and people are coming to his views on Israel in particular. Now, Tucker pushes back. Tucker shares his views that we shouldn't be continuing to fund Israel's wars, that we shouldn't give them money. That is my view. I know that to be your view. Tucker says, now I don't generalize that against the Jewish people the way you do. And then Fuentes kind of doesn't actually push back when he's confronted in that way, which makes me think, and what I wish Tucker would have done more of, I don't think he did a bad job of it, but I think if you do these kinds of interviews, you should be even more combative with someone like a Fuentes. I don't think it was as soft as, for instance, the Dave Smith interview with Nick Fuentes was, which was, I like Dave and I agree with him, but just there was no pushback whatsoever at any point to the whole thing. What's your takeaway?
Yeah, I'm only about a third of the way through. Obviously saw a lot of the clips online as well.
Yeah.
I think I'm at like the 40-minute mark.
Yeah, that's mostly his life. He's going through his life story.
Yeah, and I was really fascinated by it because I found so many similarities between my background and like my coming into the conservative movement and his, and then obviously diverged onto different paths. So the idea of coming from this family where his parents didn't go to college and he goes to school and he's like shocked at this backlash he receives for having views that are, pretty widely shared by a large portion of Americans.
At that point.
At that point, yeah. And then getting sort of on the Trump train and becoming more America first, which is sort of my ideological evolution. I was more of a libertarian and then kind of moved over to the more populist nationalist camp. I know.
We keep losing them.
Sorry about that. And then he obviously starts sort of testing boundaries on the Israel question.
Right, hyper-fixating on that.
Right, which earns him a lot of rebukes from, he describes it as like the Daily Wire camp, and then he fails to get a job at the Leadership Institute because of it and is kind of blacklisted from the conservative movement.
Yeah.
I didn't come to my Israel skepticism until later, similarly with the concerns about mass immigration and the very America First policies. And it's weird to think of, okay, so I got there maybe 2 to 3 years after Fuentes did, and a lot of the ideas that he was questioning at the time he was blacklisted are now widely accepted by the conservative movement. So I wonder if because he was siloed so early on and felt so frustrated, if because he was sort of on an island, that's what allowed him this opportunity to sort of dip his toes into more extremist views and things that people found really objectionable and not within the bounds of sort of the Overton window. Like if the conservative movement had taken him in and said like, yeah, these are legitimate questions, like let's have those debates, instead of trying to squash him, would we be looking at a different Nick Fuentes today?
especially from people who made their whole brand to be, we are against cancellation. Let's debate any proposition, no matter how radical, no matter how offensive. We don't believe in, remember big tech censorship when we still thought that was mostly about the kind of gatekeeping the companies were themselves trying to do. There's people arguing against that, but at the same time saying, yeah, don't ever put this kid in. You're not allowed to hire him. Dave Rubin type people who Fuentes calls out very explicitly, which I think is pretty fair. I think it would have been a better strategy, obviously, to thoroughly debate him on this question of how much support Israel is owed from the U.S. Now he got so that's what happened, like objectively. Then I think it is fair and in fact good to criticize where he landed on a whole host of issues, and then he doesn't get to say, boo-hoo, now no one takes me seriously. At the same time, I'm like screaming about how great I think Hitler is. Mm-hmm. Like if you scream about how much you like Hitler, people are going to rightly hold you in contempt. Like that's just true. And you have no one to blame but yourself for just affirming something that almost everyone thinks is ludicrous. Not that history is more complicated and that there are heroes and villains are a little bit more amorphous than that, which Tucker sometimes gets into with some of his guests, but an affirmative statement that someone who, killed millions of people and was also, by the way, no friend to the Catholic faith, because Nick Fuentes is trying to do this kind of Catholic monarchy type thing, just affirm that he was good. Like, people are going to say, no, that's very, very bad.
And Tucker kind of gave him an out by saying, well, do you think that at that period in your life when you're 18, 19 and trying to break into the conservative movement and you get pushed away, do you think those people repeatedly calling you anti-Semitic or racist kind of pushed you to just embrace it and kind of go full bore because, well, they're already calling me that, like I might as well do it, sort of a psychological component there. And he was like, no, I don't think that's actually what happened. Like,
no, he said, I independently eventually decided that racism was correct and anti-Semitism was correct.
So, Tucker gave him the out and he didn't take it. And I thought that was, and maybe it's true. Maybe that is what happened, but maybe also he doesn't have the self-reflection available to see that he was kind of perhaps pushed that direction.
And he is also... Frankly, I don't know why, but social media serves me up a lot of his clips these days. It's very bizarre. I don't know if this is happening to you.
Everywhere.
They're everywhere.
What does that say about us, though?
Well, I mean, they're funny in the same way that, like, Eric Cartman is funny on South Park.
He's very entertaining.
But I don't think it's
obviously a talented broadcaster.
He's talented. What my point being, he's actually, people are going to think I'm crazy for saying this, like he's moderating the things he says over time.
Yeah.
Like in this conversation with Tucker, he's like, oh, I don't hate or bear enmity toward all black people or all Jewish people. I have friends who are of these ethnicities. I just like he's weakening himself to a Charles Murray bell curve kind of view of things.
Well, in his response to like Charlie Kirk's assassination, after kind of following around Turning Point and harassing them with the groupers for years, was
generally harassing, like very much harassing them.
And now, to the point where Charlie in text messages was apparently referring to as vermin.
Yeah.
Then when Charlie gets assassinated, his response was incredibly charitable and like kind and like really reflective.
Well, I mean, I think he's savvy enough to realize that he is getting a lot of attention and again, continuing to do this Hitler stick and just kind of overt racism and overt anti-Semitism is like very much a turnoff. And so I would, at the very least, I would like to hear him more forcefully, denounce the views that he held. And then he's going to say, well, I was kidding then. But that annoys me too, because I get annoyed when, even Dave Smith has done this too, well, I'm a comedian, so I'm not claiming to know anything. Like, that's like the inverse of when an expert here, I'm the one who gets to say something. That's stupid. But then if you also like undercut your own position and say, oh, you're not supposed to take me seriously. Well, I'm not supposed to take you seriously, then don't say anything at all. Then I don't know, why are we even doing this? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get that.
You don't get to use that as an out.
The other interesting part of the interview that I was able to watch was when he was talking about how when he was starting out, he really viewed his enemy as the conservative movement writ large as opposed to the left.
Yeah.
Because he felt like they were so insufficient at countering the left that it needed to be sort of torn down and rebuilt in an America First way in order to combat the complete monopolization of institutions from the left. And I thought that was kind of a unique perspective.
It's all interesting. So conservatives are really, there is kind of a split emerging because there are a lot of, it's not just a couple borderline, very much less conservative people anyway. It's some very, very conservative, I think you would agree, commentator people who are really not happy about the extent to which he's rising and think, I'm not sure what their plan is, that more, Ben Shapiro clearly feels this way, and on and on and on, not just him, that more strenuous measures should be taken to not, that's just not going to work. Yeah, I don't know what your plan is.
I think that's stupid.
Ignoring him is not going to work. I think he should be debate in a civil way, but forced to, answer for things he said in the past, and that would be a constructive conversation to have. So I'm in between, and I don't think, so Tucker didn't go as hard as I think the situation called for. You see him against someone with Ted Cruz, who he skillfully eviscerates every second of what Ted's saying. It doesn't even need to be at that level, but somewhere in between those two, sure, I think would be a useful public exercise.
I do want to share a funny story real quick before we go, because I met Nick when I was at...
I've never met him.
I met him twice. The first time was at Harry's downtown, back when that existed, during CPAC, I think, very brief. The second time, though, was at Tim Pool's house when Kanye West came to get interviewed. Yeah. And I talked to him in the basement, which is sort of like the green room prior to the show at Tim Pool's old studio. And he kept insisting, you've written hit pieces about me. I know you have. And I was like, I've never written about you. I don't know what you're talking about. And months later on his show, he went on this rant about how he met Tiana Lowe in the basement at Tim Pool's house.
Oh, he confused you for Tiana.
And was like, this dumb B-word lied about writing hit pieces about me. And I was like, oh my gosh, he confused me and Tiana Lowe.
That's very funny. Well, we'll leave it at that. More free media right after this.